The coffee was still hot when my son called. That was the detail I kept coming back to later, when I was trying to figure out exactly when everything had cracked down the middle. The coffee was hot, the morning was quiet, and I was standing on the back porch of my house in Abilene, Texas, watching the neighbor's dog wander through the gap in the fence like he owned the place. I was 67 years old, retired after 31 years in commercial plumbing, and I had learned a long time ago that the mornings were the only honest part of the day. Everything else could be dressed up. The morning just was what it was. My son's name is Derek. He's 41, works in logistics for a trucking company outside of Fort Worth, and he married a woman named Cassandra 12 years ago. I will say this about Cassandra: she is organized. She is the kind of woman who has color-coded tabs in her planner and sends calendar invites for birthday dinners. She is efficient in the way that certain machines are efficient, and like certain machines, she tends to treat everything around her as either useful or in the way. I had tried, over the years, to be useful to her. My wife, Carol, passed 6 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, 8 weeks from diagnosis to the end. After that, it was just me in the house in Abilene, and Derek started calling more often, which I appreciated, and Cassandra started mentioning, more often than felt accidental, that the house was large for one person, that the property taxes must be something, that a man my age might think about simplifying. I appreciated that less. But I want to be fair. Those early years after Carol, they helped. They brought my grandson Tyler over on weekends sometimes, and I would take him out to the garage and let him hand me tools while I worked on the truck. And he would ask questions the way young kids do, rapid fire and earnest. And those Saturday mornings felt like something worth holding on to. Tyler was 8 when Carol died. He turned 22 this past spring. That is where this story begins. Tyler's 22nd birthday, or rather, the party for it. I found out the way I seem to find out most things in my family these days, which is sideways and too late. Tyler's girlfriend, a girl named Megan, who I had met twice at Christmas and liked immediately both times, sent me a text message on a Thursday evening. She thought I was already in the loop. That was clear from how she wrote it, casual and bright, saying she was so excited to see me Saturday that Tyler had been talking about how much it would mean to have me there. I read that message standing in the kitchen, and there was a long moment where I simply did not understand what I was reading. I set my phone down. I picked it up again. I called Derek. He answered on the third ring, and I could hear the television in the background, something with a lot of noise, and he turned it down and said, "Hey, Dad, what's up?" In that particular tone people use when they already know the conversation is going to be uncomfortable and they are hoping to keep it brief. I asked him about Saturday. There was a pause, not a long one, but the kind of pause that has weight to it, the kind where you can feel someone on the other end making a decision. He said they were doing a small thing for Tyler's birthday, just family and some of Tyler's friends. He said he had meant to call me. He said it had been a hectic week. I asked him what time. He said it started at 3. I said I would be there. Another pause. Longer this time. Then Cassandra's voice came onto the line, not because she had grabbed the phone, but because she was close enough to him that I could hear her saying, in a low voice that she probably thought was quieter than it was, that they had already done the head count, that it was a seating issue, that it was just easier. I did not say anything for a moment. I was looking out the kitchen window at the oak tree in the backyard that Carol had planted the year we moved in, back when it was barely a sapling and she had watered it herself every evening that first summer. It was a large tree now. It had been there 33 years. I told Derek I would let him get back to his evening. He said okay. He said he would call me tomorrow. He never did. I did not go to the party. I want to be honest about those next few days, because this story is not about making myself into someone nobler than I was. Those days were hard. I am 67 years old, and I have buried a wife and a brother, and both my parents, and I know what real loss feels like, and this was not that, but it was something. There is a particular kind of hurt that comes from realizing that the people you built your life around have quietly reclassified you, moved you from one column to another, and you were the last to know. I spent a lot of that weekend in the garage. I sanded things that did not need sanding. I listened to the radio. I let myself be angry for a while, because I think that is the honest thing to do, and then I started thinking clearly. Here's what I thought about. I thought about the last 3 times I had visited Derek and Cassandra's house. I thought about how every one of those visits, Cassandra had found a way to bring the conversation around to my finances. Not directly, never directly, but sideways. The same way everything else came. Asking whether I had updated my will since Carol passed, mentioning a financial advisor her brother used, asking once with a smile that was perfectly calibrated to seem like affection, whether I had ever thought about putting the house in a family trust, just for simplicity, just to avoid the estate process. I had said I would think about it. I had not thought about it, because there was nothing to think about. The house was mine. Carol and I had paid it off together. I thought about Tyler. I thought about the fact that Tyler had not called me himself to explain or apologize. Tyler, who I had spent every other Saturday with until he was 14. Tyler, who I had taught to change a tire and balance a checkbook and throw a proper spiral. I did not know yet how much of that silence was his choice and how much of it had been arranged for him. I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I am still giving him the benefit of the doubt. But I noticed the silence. And I thought about Megan's text message, the one that said she was excited to see me there. The one that told me, without meaning to, that Tyler's girlfriend believed Tyler's grandfather had been invited to his own grandson's birthday party. That told me a few things. The Monday after the party, I called my attorney. His name is Ray Whitfield, and I have used him for 20 years since we did the closing on a piece of commercial property Carol and I bought and later sold. Ray is 70, still sharp, and he does not waste words. I told him I wanted to review my estate documents. He said come in Thursday. I went in Thursday. I am not going to go into the specific details of what I changed and what I did not change, because that is not the point of this story, and frankly, it is nobody's business but mine. What I will say is that Ray and I had a productive 2 hours, and I walked out of his office feeling, for the first time in about 5 days, like the ground was solid under my feet again. I also, while I was in Ray's office, mentioned Cassandra's questions about the family trust. Ray looked at me over his glasses and said very quietly that it was good I had come in when I did. I drove home through downtown Abilene with the windows down, even though it was warm for May, because the air felt like something I wanted more of. I stopped and got a chicken sandwich at a place on Pine Street that I had been going to since Derek was in middle school, and I ate it in the parking lot, and I thought about Carol, the way I often do when things get clarified. She had a saying she used when people underestimated her, which happened occasionally because she was small and soft-spoken, and people made assumptions. She would smile to herself and say, "They'll figure it out." She never said it meanly. She just said it like a fact. I said it out loud in the parking lot to nobody. They'll figure it out. It took them 2 weeks. What happened, as I later pieced together, was that Tyler told Megan he needed to call me and apologize, and Megan, who has a spine and apparently had been saying this since the weekend of the party, told him that needing to and doing it were different things. Tyler called me on a Tuesday evening. I was in the garage again, though this time I was actually working on something, replacing the brake lines on my truck, which needed doing. He started with, "I'm sorry, Grandpa," which I respected. No preamble, no softening. Just the words, placed down plainly. I said I was listening. He told me his mother had organized the party, that she had said it would be overwhelming with too many people, that she had told him I would understand, that he had believed her, or told himself he did, which he said he knew was not the same thing. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said he should have called me himself, from the beginning, and that he was sorry he had not. I told him I appreciated that. I meant it. I asked him how the party was. He said it was fine. Dad gave a toast. There was a lot of food. People seemed to have fun. I asked him if he had fun. A pause. Then he said, honestly, that it had felt off. That he had kept looking at the door. I told him to bring Megan to Abilene the next time he had a free weekend. I told him I would cook. Tyler used to love the brisket I made, the one I had learned from a man I worked with in my first year in the trade. A slow-smoked recipe that takes the better part of a day. He said yes before I finished the sentence. We talked for 40 minutes. It was the best conversation I'd had in months. 3 days later, Derek and Cassandra came to Abilene. They did not call ahead in the usual way. Derek sent a text that morning saying they were going to be in the area and wanted to stop by, which was not something they did, Abilene not being the kind of place you pass through on the way to somewhere else. I knew what was coming. I made a pot of coffee, cleaned up the kitchen, and sat down at the table with the newspaper I had not finished reading. They arrived at 11. Cassandra was carrying a small bakery box, which she set on the counter with both hands like it was an offering. Derek gave me a hug that lasted a second too long, the kind of hug that is also an apology. I poured 3 cups of coffee and we sat down. Cassandra started. She was sorry about the party. It had been a logistical decision, not a personal one. She hoped I understood. She'd always thought of me as family, which was why she felt she could be direct with me about things, which was actually her way of pivoting toward the real reason they had come. She said she'd been thinking about what made the most sense for everyone, long term, and that Derek and she had been talking, and they felt that having a plan in place now would protect everyone, including me. She said the word protect with particular care, the way someone places a chess piece. I let her finish. Then I asked her what specifically she was proposing. She said they had been talking to a financial planner. She said that for a man living alone, maintaining a property this size carried risks, and that there were structures that could give everyone peace of mind. She slid a folder across the table. It had a logo on it from a firm I did not recognize. The paper inside was formal, with blanks where names and property descriptions would go. I looked at the folder. I did not open it. I looked at Derek. He was looking at his coffee cup. I said, clearly and without any particular heat, that I had met with my attorney 2 weeks ago, that my estate documents were current, that the property was titled the way I wanted it titled, and that I was not interested in restructuring anything. Cassandra said she understood. That was fine. She just wanted me to have the information. I said I had the information I needed. She smiled. Adjusted. She said she hoped there were no hard feelings about the party, that sometimes families miscommunicated, that it was really about Tyler and they had all just wanted Tyler to have a great day. I said I agreed it was about Tyler. I said Tyler and I had already spoken and that we were in good shape and that he was bringing Megan down for the weekend next month. The smile held, but something behind it shifted. Derek looked up from his coffee cup. I said I appreciated them driving down. I said the coffee was fresh if they wanted more. I said I had a man coming over at noon to look at some work I was thinking about doing on the garage, which was true, and so they were welcome to stay until then. They left 40 minutes later. The bakery box sat on the counter. I opened it after they drove away. Pecan cookies. I ate one. It was actually very good. I called Ray that afternoon, not because I needed to, but because I had told him I would let him know how things went. He asked how Cassandra had seemed. I said focused. He made a sound that might have been a laugh and said to call him if anything further developed. I said I would. Tyler and Megan came down 6 weeks later on a Saturday in late June. I had the brisket on the smoker by 6 in the morning. The way you have to do it, low and slow, no shortcuts. Tyler arrived before noon and spent 2 hours in the garage with me talking about nothing in particular, which is the best kind of conversation. Megan sat on the back porch reading, and at one point she looked up and asked me about the oak tree, how old it was, and I told her about Carol planting it, and she asked questions the right way, quietly and carefully, the way people do when they genuinely want to know. We ate dinner at the table Carol and I had bought at an estate sale in 1991, a big oak table that seats 8, and we filled 3 of those seats, and it did not feel empty. After dinner, Tyler asked me in a careful way whether things were all right with his parents and me. I said we had talked. I said we had reached an understanding. He asked what I meant by that. I said I meant that everybody now knew where everybody stood and that was useful information to have. He nodded. He is a smart kid. He got that from Carol. Later, after Megan had gone inside, Tyler and I sat on the back porch in the dark for a while. The neighbor's dog came through the fence again. Tyler watched it wander across the yard and said, out of nowhere, that he was sorry he had not called me sooner. I told him I knew. He said he should have known better. I said he did know better, and that was why he called, and that was enough. We sat there for a while after that not talking, which was fine. The oak tree was a dark shape against the lighter dark of the sky, and the night was warm the way Texas nights get in June, heavy and still, and somewhere down the block someone was grilling something that smelled like a good idea. I am 67 years old. I have the house, paid for. I have the truck, running better than it has in years. I have Ray Whitfield's number in my phone and a standing appointment every January to review where things stand. I have Tyler, and I have the reasonable hope that what we put back together these last few months is stronger than what existed before, because it is built on honesty now instead of assumption. I do not have bitterness, or not much. There is a small hard thing in the chest that might be there for a while, but I have carried harder things. You learn after enough years to travel light where you can and to carry what you have to carry without making it the whole story. What I have, mostly, is clarity about who I am, about what I have built, about what it is worth, and to whom. Cassandra taught me that without meaning to, which I find almost funny. Carol would have found it very funny. She would have said, "See, I told you they would figure it out." She would have been right, the way she generally was. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment below. Tell me what it brought up for you. The people who find their way to this channel usually have a story of their own, and I have found that reading those comments is one of the better parts of my week. Thank you for being here.